Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Automotive Management Live. This is our first session of the day. We've still got quite a few people coming in through the door, so just expect a few more people to come in whilst we go through the intros. My name's Stephen Briers. I am your host for this session, which is on winning Battleground 2025 with customer service. It's being sponsored by JudgeService, and I'm delighted to be joined by Neil, Addley and Kim Costello for this session. So having completed her role as Chief Marketing Officer at Pendragon, Kim is now the Global Head of Marketing at Pinewood, while Neil is Founder and Managing Director at JudgeService Research. Good to see you both. Both companies are well represented on the showroom floor. You can't have failed to have missed the Pinewood stand on your way in with its big arrows. Please do go and visit them later on. I'm told there's great coffee on the Pinewood stand. I'm sure JudgeService equally has got some goodies for everyone.
Our sweet trolley is returned.
Excellent. Well, it's a challenging market. That almost goes without saying. Both after sales in used cars, not to mention the impact of the ZEV mandate is having on dealers' businesses, and that's not to mention the finance commission issues that we're currently facing. But that's being discussed elsewhere, thankfully. Neil and Kim will discuss how you can best use customer service to win. They'll be taking some insight from the recent State of the Nation survey, the NFDA Consumer Attitude Survey, and their own proprietary data to reveal some of the best practices for managing customer service, reviews, and complaints. There will be time at the end for you to ask your own questions, so please get involved. It's a great opportunity for you to ask questions of our experts on stage. If you put your hand up, a mic will come to you in due course. So let's kick off. So Neil, starting with you. Are customer complaints really on the rise? And if so, is the rise of digital platforms and social media changing the nature of complaints in recent years? Do we have keyboard warriors that feel much safer now to complain about things behind the safety of a computer screen?
Sure, I think that's a very good point. So, according to the Motor Ombudsman, complaints this year, can everyone hear me all right? Is that good? Complaints this year are up about 40% on last year, which is again 40% up on the year before. So that gives you a sort of context where people are more grumpy, I think, as consumers, more picky, if you like. Although you have to put that in a context. So Citizens Advice Bureau in September this year had about 400 complaints. And when you think there's 40 million cars on the road, it's a tiny drop in the ocean, really. Although, as I say, they are up year on year. A third of the complaints are around things like faults, and a third of them are about complaints, and most of them are on used cars. So about 75% are on used cars. I guess the service department's at the pointy end of this. So whether it's a new or a used car, actually when something goes wrong, it's normally service desks that take the hit. So it's important for them to be prepared to do that. And I think the thing that comes through this whole presentation really, Kim, is around customer service through your colleagues, colleague experience, and also making sure you use tech to help make things simpler, not harder. We actually, but we checked into our hotel last night, and it was a Premier Inn.
I'm glad you clarified that.
Yeah. And you had to check in, five colleagues, 5 times using a key code, then you do your card yourself. In the old days, you'd have thought you just turn up and say, we've got 5 bookings, can we book in? So the technology's actually made it harder to do stuff in that case, whereas what we should be doing is looking to make it simplified, and where you can, make it connect between different suppliers.
I think to that point, technology is not the answer. It's the utilization and implementation of the technology that is the answer. So just layering over AI or laying over technology without having a good base and a good understanding and good processes, much to your example, actually make it more difficult for the customer. So it's a key issue when you're looking to add technology into the business.
Absolutely right. When it comes to why people are complaining more, the biggest reason that Bill Fennell from the TMO says is the cost of living. So people are looking to get money back, and they're asking for much more compensation than perhaps they should be entitled to. And I think the TMO says that they actually settle around 20% of the value that customers ask for, so they are on our side as well. Finance is obviously, Martin Lewis did us a massive disservice earlier in the year, and then the recent court judgments obviously sent the industry into a bit of a tailspin. And then the other thing that, particularly on new cars, is causing concern is EV range, where people buy a car believing the range that they're told, and then in the winter, when it does about 2/3 of that, they complain about the new car itself as well. And to your point, Stephen, 70% of complaints are now by email. So yes, there is a lot of online chatter, online reviews and that as well. But actually when people come to complain into a dealership, it is by email. And of course, that's easy to miss. So it's really important that you've got processes and systems in place to make sure when you get those complaints in, that you've got a clear accountability of what happens with it. A process, not a post-it note, if you will. So in terms of what the concerns are about, well, we analysed for the top 10 dealer groups, we looked at all of their complaints, and we used a bit of AI to do this. That's not triumphing AI over human analysis, it just does it a lot quicker. And the biggest 55% of concerns were around vehicle faults, 24% about the experience, and 20% about the service desk itself. And then this one's quite hard to read, but overall, most of the time, and we'll circulate these, Stephen, afterwards, yeah?
Yep.
But overall, there's 96% satisfaction with most of the areas of a service experience. So the overall experience, booking stuff in, all that kind of stuff. Where it slips a little bit, and we were talking about this the other day, is there's opportunities in terms of proactiveness, keeping customers informed about what's going on. And again, that's using the systems to their advantage. But also, and this goes back to a thing many of you probably know called the service marketing mix, where one of the keys of it is physical evidence. And actually, one of the areas where customers mark the dealers down is on the cleanliness of the vehicle when they pick it up. So that's quite a simple thing to get right, but really important. And I know, and this is just an anecdote, when my wife had her car serviced recently at Stratstone in Harrogate,
Experience?
She said two things when she got home. She said, Janet was on the service desk. Janet's really nice. So Janet looked after her. And then she said, and my baby's nice and clean.
There you go.
So that, you know,
Stratstone service.
that's Stratstone. And that's, I think that's the key, is it's people and it's the physical evidence that the job's been done.
So, Kim, if we think about proactive communications, what role can that play in reducing those after-sales related complaints? And what are some of the common mistakes that dealerships may make as well?
Sure. So I think what a big mistake people make is they know that there's going to be a little bit of friction in, and they honestly don't want to necessarily know what that is, because then they have to solve the problem. That is kind of an old school way of thinking. If you ask your customers what's going on, you can drill down to not only solving the issue for that customer, but actually solving a larger issue that you may be experiencing in the dealership, and really turn a negative situation into a positive one. So a lot of the things that are key when you're proactively communicating is personalizing your communication. And the BCG chart that's on here, it shows the level of growth in customer with the personalization. So the more you personalize your messaging, which is honestly common sense, we are all marketed to every single day. If you say something and you use my name, you say the correct car, you say something about me, I'm way more likely to engage. Why would it be any different than with anybody else? So that personalization is key. Much to what Neil was talking about, informing people where their vehicles are. When you look back at that chart that said about the complaints, it's usually with the service department, not necessarily with the person, like Janet, who's great, but with customers being frustrated, wanting to understand where their car is. They dropped it off at 8 o'clock. They said it was going to be ready at 5 o'clock. It's 3:30. I got to figure out what I'm doing. Where's my car? There's a way to proactively communicate with your customers, let them know. So Pinewood system has a vehicle tracker. So you can actually, when the customer drops off the car, they click on the vehicle tracker and it shows you the progress of your vehicle. That's huge. What that does is it takes away erroneous time from your service desk, picking up the phone, constantly answering, it's not ready yet, or it is ready yet, or no, it should be ready at 5 when they're trying to engage with another customer. So it allows those communications to flow more smoothly, and allows the technology to make things easier, not harder. The explanation of the cost, being really clear on the breakdown of the cost. This is another thing as dealers we're not great at because we know it's an uncomfortable conversation, especially in the service department. Nobody's excited to hand you over a boatload of money, especially when you think you're going in for an oil change and you get called and they've got to rip apart the engine because there's a hose. Explain to the customer why. Let them know what the issue is, show them the video, help them walk through it. It makes them more comfortable, it builds that trust. And then when they come to pick up the car or they're having that difficult conversation, it's way easier. The customer satisfaction goes up significantly from there. And then I think a really big one is the remembering self versus the experiencing self. And what that is when you ask a customer on a survey after they've come to the dealership, how was your experience? You get 2 points. You get the remembering self, which is they either remember the peak or the valley. And then you have the experience, and they usually remember their last touch point. So you're not getting a true representation of each point, but if you have a good last point, touch point with your customer, and you have at least a very high peak point, you're going to get a positive survey. If you have a high peak point and a really negative last touch, you're probably going to get a worse experience, even though they didn't have an overall bad experience. It's just the difference in understanding that and then utilizing that appropriately. And then these lead to value creation. Again, with the chart on there, you can see happy customers, communication with customers, clarity. That absolutely leads to them spending more money, revenue, and growth generating. So there is absolutely no reason not to proactively communicate with your customers, and it's actually a detriment if you don't.
Your early slide, Neil, showed a variety of ways in which people issued complaints, not all of them directly to the dealership. So how can dealers encourage more people to provide feedback, both positive and negative, directly to them? And then how can they effectively use customer surveys to improve their service levels?
I mean, I'm a big believer in market research, otherwise I wouldn't have spent 14 years running a business that does it. So I think it's important, both in the sales process but also after sales, that we are asking our customers how the experience went, and not just using that to try and get a score that's useful to be able to compare sites or whatever, but it's really so that we can learn for the future. So whether it's a complaint that comes in, or whether it's a survey that's completed online, or an OEM one for that matter, then it's really important to use that as a basis for learning and trying to make things not go wrong in the future. We have a tool we call Resolution, which allows you to see what went wrong, make sure that it gets fixed by whoever, by escalating it within the business, and then produces reports to tell you where you've got those gaps, so you can fix them and make sure they don't happen again. And I think whether whatever you use to do that, just not Post-it notes, I'd say, is the key.
Yeah. Kim, do you have some thoughts on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think all of this proactive communication is great, and to Neil's point, the research and understanding is great, but if you don't fix the problem, you don't respond to the customer, you're going to fail. So we have to be better at responding to the customer as an industry. We have to be better at understanding the problem and truly fixing the problems, because otherwise all of the research, all of the comms are for naught, and you're actually going to anger customers more if they tell you something's wrong and you just don't respond.
Mm-hmm. I think to that point as well, if you don't, then it costs you more in the long run anyway.
Absolutely.
Because you spend loads of time dealing with an unhappy customer rather than fixing the problem again.
Or worst case scenario, most likely you're going to lose them, so your retention goes down, and we all know it's way more expensive to get a new customer than to keep a happy customer.
Let's talk about artificial intelligence. It's a bit of a buzz phrase. A lot of people talking about it. You wander out on the floor and you can see various stands promoting
It
AI.
can also stand for automotive intelligence, just to be clear.
Could well do. So do you have any examples of how AI and technology is being used to improve customer experience and reduce complaint levels?
Sure, absolutely. So we just made an investment in a company called Seas, which is an artificial intelligence company, to look at how we can better utilize artificial intelligence in the Pinewood AI system. So I think you can use it in a variety of ways. Like I said earlier, if you just put in any sort of technology and you just layer it on a problem, it's not going to fix it. Technology does not fix the problem. Artificial intelligence does not fix the problem. Artificial intelligence understands and learns from the data set it is put on. So therefore, you need to make sure you have a robust data set and you understand what you want to get out of that. And then you can layer on some artificial intelligence. It will remove a lot of manual processes. I think one of the biggest things is people get afraid that artificial intelligence is going, or any sort of LLM or anything like that, is going to take over your job or replace you. It's not the case. It should remove a lot of manual processes and make it much easier for you to communicate with your customers, be able to decipher what they're saying, and be able to proactively and reactively communicate with them. It should also be able to help you run more smoothly as a business from an enterprise level down to a dealership level. Anything from scheduling, from invoicing, all of those things are major, especially when you're dealing with customers.
Sure. Yeah, and in our world, you've already seen how we use AI to do the analysis to see what the big problems were in service departments, but also we have a system that allows you to reply to reviews using AI. So it uses the tens of thousands of reviews that have been replied to in the past, generates recommended replies to you, and then you can choose what you want. And if you don't like it, you can say why it's wrong. So just an example of how you can do it. It's really about using it like a really, really, really clever spreadsheet that learns as it goes. I mean, I don't think it's actually artificial intelligence, really, is it? It's not C3PO. It's more like a set of really, really clever rules that it can use to work out what happens next.
So what you're saying is next year I'm not going to be interviewing 2 chatbots on stage. No. You will still be here.
Absolutely.
If you'll have us back.
I do think one of the key things to touch on, I don't mean to interrupt, is the identifying and unlocking patterns. Because what AI can be really useful then is if you do have a plethora of complaints, or even just a multitude of complaints that you don't even realize, for a human to categorize, understand that a lot of them may fall back into a supply chain issue. It may fall back into sales, service, but you don't realize it from simply glancing at it. It's going to take some time. By layering AI on it, the machine can actually differentiate the complaints, tie them back, categorize them, so you understand, oh wait, we actually have a massive issue right here. We don't need to refix everything or rejig everything to fix everything. We just need to fix this problem to start with. And I think that's a huge thing with categorizing, because then you can understand where your issues are, both positive and negative, and go from there.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So, go on, Neil.
I was just going to say, just show of hands, who uses ChatGPT in the room?
Impressive.
Couldn't have asked that 2 years ago, could you?
No, absolutely. Well, the big question, perhaps the $1 million question, what are the biggest wins in terms of reducing customer complaints?
Again, so we, based on the surveys that we do, we're a big believer in the Net Promoter Score as a means of measuring how well customers are satisfied. And what we can see, and again, this will be available afterwards, is the biggest bang for your buck comes from the attitude of the dealer's staff. So if you improved that question by 10%, you have the biggest impact on the promoter score. It goes up to 95% if you get that right. So it is all about people. When I started in this industry nearly 30 years ago, someone said to me, it's all about people. And despite all the layers of cost and technology that we've layered on, it is still all about people, about that training and empowering people to make a difference. And this just sort of shows that data represented on a graph where you can see if you've got a lower score in terms of satisfaction with this staff attitude, your promoter score is quite low, but it goes up really quickly if you can improve it just that little bit. So it is about training and empowering people.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and are there a series of metrics that dealerships can use to kind of gauge and track the effectiveness of their complaint management?
Sure. So I mean, we use the promoter score all the time, and that's on a scale of 0 to 10. How likely would you be to recommend a customer? But you've got other ones that.
Sure, absolutely. So this chart is really interesting. This is a Harvard Business Review chart, and I think it's really important that when we look at metrics, we don't look at them in a silo in a vacuum. So Net Promoter Score, we're all very familiar with that, reputation score, anything like that that's measuring the reputation of your business and the emotions of your or the feelings of your customers, are absolutely essential. However, standing alone, it's not good enough. So you have the CSV, which is the customer surplus value. So when you're looking at this chart, to the left you have the Net Promoter Score. Let's look at Apple, for example, 40, they're quite high up. Now, the CSV is telling you what it's going to cost a customer to leave you. Now, this may seem low. However, this takes into account AirPods, this takes into account everything Apple sells. It's the average customer in order to leave is $711. Obviously, it's the US, so it's dollars. But then you look down at McDonald's, which is -50. So really unhappy experience, and it only takes 81 cents for a customer to go to Burger King or somewhere else. The interesting ones that jump out at this is AT&T. Right, so AT&T, negative 18. On its own, you're thinking net promoter score, very low. They must be a terrible business. But people are not willing to leave until you hit about the $467 mark. That's a pretty high cost for a customer to leave. So how can you be so bad at customer service and yet people are not willing to leave? That kind of doesn't make sense. You've got to look at these two things. So AT&T, quite a sticky product. You have contracts, it's expensive, there's a variety of reasons for that. It's important that you look at both of these side by side. If you just understand what the net promoter score is without understanding what it's going to cost for your customer to leave, you're only seeing half the picture. So AT&T doesn't really care about their customer. Well, no offense to AT&T, I'm making a bold statement here. Based on these numbers, AT&T doesn't focus tremendously on their customer service. They may care a little bit less because they know you're not going to leave. However, Amazon kind of cares a little bit more. I mean, they're not blowing it out of the water, but they care more because for $19, you're going to go down the street and buy it somewhere else. So I think understanding the metrics will help you understand the customer lifetime value that you layer on. And then layering on the quantitative intuition is a big thing. So I'm not sure if anybody's heard about the QI. It was coined by a couple professors. One is Dr. Oded Netzer out of Columbia University. And they coined this phrase, and what it is understanding the numbers and then layering over intuition, common sense, basically. So if you just look at data, again, in a silo, it's going to lead you down a path that may not be an accurate path. If you just go with gut feel, it's not going to lead you down an accurate path. You have to layer those two things in. Again, it seems really basic, but so often people just look at the data and go down a rabbit hole, and it doesn't work out well. If it did, we had a whole lot more successful companies rolling around. You have to be able to understand the data, utilize the data, and layer in common sense.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Neil. In terms of back to basics as well, I guess, with metrics, one of the key ones that we see where you get more and more complaints if you don't, is the speed of response. So a real simple thing to measure, how quickly do people reply to reviews online, and also how quickly do complaints get resolved. Now, I know that they're not going to all get resolved instantly, but is it a 48-hour or a 96-hour process to get them resolved? Because that makes a big difference to the customer and also to how much it costs to remedy it as well.
Yeah, looking at the metrics, where might dealers kind of sit on that? I suppose it might vary, obviously vary depending on the dealer, but also whether it's a premium brand.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's somewhere we should look into, actually.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to measure that because one of the things most of us in this room know is when you're dealing with customers, getting them to understand that they're, and I'll pull from when I worked at Pendragon, that you had Pendragon, then you had Stratstone, you had Evans Halshaw, you had Car Store. Under Stratstone, you had Mercedes, you had, Ferrari, you had Aston Martin. And people don't always understand that Stratstone is not actually Mercedes. It's Stratstone dealer. So I think it's a little bit more challenging. You really have to go almost dealership by dealership, and it's harder to do by brand. Not impossible, but we also know that certain brands are really sticky. But you can see with the trends that people don't stay with a brand like they used to. So I think, again, you have to layer out these metrics, and it's a lot to look at, but that's when you get the complete understanding of your customer, and by only looking at one portion of the metrics, you're just missing out on so much. And it's why you have customers that just pop around, and we always narrow it down to price and convenience, and those aren't always the case. And we are all customers in this room, so I think we all know we don't always go for the cheapest, we don't always go for the fastest, we don't always go for that stuff. We go for what makes sense to us and where we feel we can trust people. So we have to look at the metrics as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we do in our Lost Sales program is look and see if someone looks at a particular vehicle, do they go on to buy that vehicle from somewhere else? And the stickiest of those is Mini. So if you look at a Mini, you're going to buy a Mini. Whereas if you look at a Renault or a Nissan, nothing wrong with the product, but that's a much more transactional product. So you'll go and buy what's cheapest. Whereas Mini, if you look at a Mini, 94% of people will go and buy a Mini somewhere else if they don't buy it.
Yeah, that stickiness and loyalty is really interesting to look at over the last 2 or 3 years, kind of post-COVID, but also with the whole electrification. where it's really kind of leveled off the playing field for a lot of brands. The Korean brands, for example, taking a lot of business away from some of the premium brands. Yeah, being seen in premium terms now in a way they certainly weren't before.
Also, you look at the price points. There's some of these brands that are extremely expensive, and so their electric vehicles or some of their top premium models in these volume brands are on par with some premium brands. So, there's a lot of movement in this space.
Yeah, definitely. So, some people might think that customer service is something of a pink and fluffy thing. It doesn't have any sort of ground and any basis in some sort of realities. I mean, what hard evidence is there that employee experience, customer experience improve profitability and shareholder value?
Absolutely. So this is a big one for me. So when I was with Pendragon, I was both Chief Marketing Officer and Chief Customer Officer. I believe that you have to have the customer in the voice, and there's tons of studies to support that. One of the things that, and I think most people are starting to see that more and more, one of the things that's not always talked about is employee experience and how that ties to customer experience and how that ties to shareholder value. So we all know happy employees work harder, right? People that feel empowered make decisions that are usually better for the company, and they feel empowered to do that and make it better for the customer as well. When employees are happy, then customers are happy. Customers spend more money. It's customer lifetime value. They come back, they spend over and over again, and they spend more money because they then trust you. Where they come in to get their car serviced the first time, they don't really know if you're taking advantage of them or not. By the time the fourth time and Janet's at the service desk, your wife is going to be more comfortable. Janet says, I need it, I'm probably going to get it, right? And so therefore, Janet's giving great customer service. She's spending more money. Shareholder value goes up when you have a publicly traded company. And this chart shows that. I think it's, and I apologize, I don't have it made to memory. I think it's 38%. This is in the last 12 months with good customer service and how that directly correlates, good employee experience, good customer service, how that directly correlates to shareholder value. So it's not a fluffy, it's not a nice to have, it's a must have. If you want to make more money and you want to grow your businesses from a dealership to an enterprise level, you have to invest in your employees, and you've got to make sure that they're empowered to invest in the customer experience as well. And anybody that says it's nice to have just really needs to do some research.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, all the data we have points to that loyalty.
Yeah.
And I think it was Richard Branson that said, if you look after your employees, then they'll look after your customers. Simple as that.
Absolutely. And I think one thing is that I didn't touch on, it has to be cross-functional. If you just have a customer service team and you think that's enough, you are absolutely wrong. You just are. You have to have buy-in from senior leadership across the teams. My marketing team has to absolutely talk with my product development team, has to absolutely talk with my sales team, has to absolutely talk with my finance team. We all have to be on the same page. It is not okay just to have a customer experience team dealing with customer issues. Everybody has to make sure. We are all salespeople. When people used to ask me what I did for Pendragon, the first thing I said was, I sell cars. Because that's what I do. That is my entire job to market, is I sell cars. I sell technology. Everybody needs to address customer experience. It's not good enough for one team.
So that's easy to say, not always easy to achieve. So any advice around how you get that complete buy-in at all levels throughout the business?
I'm really loud, so it's easier for me. So I've worked with my CEO for quite some time. It wasn't always easy. There was a lot of conversations. There's a lot of studies. I am big with showing a study. I love proof. If I can bring proof from some really reputable organizations, industries, universities, it's really hard for you to tell me no. You have to make your voice known. You have to have the seat at the table. You have to bring the documentation that shows this is not just made up hoopla. This actually has stats behind it. It's really hard for a CFO to argue with this. I don't know any CFO that doesn't want to make money. So better customer service, better customer experience, better employee experience directly correlates to your profits. I mean, if they don't see it, they probably shouldn't be CFO or CEO of the organization, frankly.
Yeah.
I think the key is to make sure you've got those metrics in place, so you're measuring stuff, because you can use that to then compare the top performers with those that aren't performing as well. Okay. And even within your own business, then you can justify investing more in customer service.
And employees.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, any final thoughts before we throw it out to the floor?
I mean, mine's simple. It is all about people. It's about measuring stuff, and it's using technology to make life easier for your colleagues and your customers. Simple as that, really.
I think so. Yeah, I think it's, I've said a lot, so, but I think it's understanding your customers, understanding your employees, and doing something about it. Not just knowing there's an issue or knowing something exists, but actually actioning it.
Okay, you've heard from our two experts. It's an opportunity for you to ask some questions. Anyone that feels brave enough to go first? Oh, I shouldn't have said brave enough.
We're very
It'll
nice
be
people.
fine. Sorry?
We're very nice people. They
Absolutely.
don't have to be brave.
Just put your hand up. A microphone will come to you. I will keep looking at it until I'll start focusing on you individually until somebody puts their hand up. I'm going to ask a question. Please give it some thought because it is a great opportunity. There we go. There's a question. There's a hand at the back. Thank you, sir.
Hello?
Yep.
You can hear me? Okay. First, it was really just about AI. I mean, I get very irritated when I reach out to a company and get robot responding to me. You're kind of indicating that you believe it's got a lot better. You know, I don't want to be irritated by a bot when I try to get hold of somebody and there's nobody on the phones anymore. You know, what's the research around that? How does that kind of show up these days?
So in the case of like replying to reviews, most companies actually have like templates anyway. So what it does is speed up that process rather than someone having to type a template in. They can just use AI to replace some of that. It can get fooled, it can get tricked. It's not good at spotting irony and stuff like that. But it is the technology is improving all the time, and the amount of data that it's able to process it improves the quality of responses all the time as well. So I think it should be there to help people do things quicker, but you're never going to replace a human being. But it can help speed things up.
And I think I appreciate your frustration because I'm notorious for like yelling at the phone. I'm like, customer service. I think so. There's some studies around it that if you identify that you're dealing with a chatbot or a robot, so, I mean, obviously, if you're calling, you understand. But if you're dealing with a chatbot, identifying that is a chatbot and not trying to masquerade itself as a human, and simply saying, I can help you answer these things or direct you to the right person. You're more willing to. Studies show that people are more willing to engage with that. And because of the advancements happening so fast with AI, they are actually able to usually get you a better answer much faster than a human. It does not replace the human, but in some instances, you're able to get a better amount of customer service, and especially in off-peak hours. Now, it also has to be smart enough in how you put it in and how you utilize it to hand over to a customer service person, and then they have the entire record. And so they can pick up and seamlessly transition and get you to the answer. But it's a joint thing. Again, to Neil's point, AI is not meant to replace people. It's meant to aid in people's experiences. And I'll use really quickly an example of cash points. Right? Cash points, ATMs in the States. When those came in, people were freaked out. They're going to take away the bank tellers' jobs. No more jobs for all the bank tellers. They're gone. What actually happened was it had the bank teller's job expanded. So they then became revenue generators. They were selling products. They were engaging with the customers. They were doing all these things, as well as on occasion dealing with handing out money. But the cash point took care of that part. So it was like a superfluous job that really wasn't a revenue generating situation. It took them from a cost center to revenue generating. So it was really, really beneficial. So it's how technology is utilized, much like anything else. But absolutely, there has to be some companies do it really well, and frankly, some companies don't. And it's really frustrating as a customer, and your customers will leave if you don't do it well.
Any other questions? You've seen how easy it is and how well our experts respond. There's one down at the front. It would be great if we could keep going front and back so Kate can build up her steps for the day.
You said early on in your presentation that 20 years ago you looked at the scores and it was all about the people, and you look now and it's all about the people. What haven't we done in 20 years and what's stopping us?
I think it's a case of, well, I think people turn over quite quickly in this industry, and so you've always got people who are learning stuff. So it is about focusing on that training and support up front when people come into new roles. And I think, we see it in sales in particular, staff turnover's quite high, and so it's really hard to keep that focus. And a colleague of mine was going to buy a car this weekend went to 2 different dealerships, one great experience, proper salesperson, gave them the chance to test drive the car. The other one was trying to shoehorn them into a car before they'd even met them. So it's that training and development, I think, is probably the key.
Yeah, and I think that customers' experience demands have changed, what they expect, and so have employees. So there was, again, I'm a nerd when it comes to studies, so I was reading a study the other week on the differences in generational expectations from an employee's standpoint, and what somebody who's in their 60s to 70s expects, what somebody that's in their 40s to 50s expects, and what somebody that's in 20s to 30s expect. And they're very, very different things. So as leaders, we cannot just expect to give one experience across the board to employees, because they will leave. Some people really need to be told that they are doing a good job. It's usually the younger generation, whereas the middle generation wants some sort of show me the money, you know. And then you have the older generation that wants loyalty and how that looks. Customers are the same, and especially if you look at pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, the expectations that customers have are completely different. So what have we not done in the last 20 years? A lot. You know, the automotive industry is notoriously slow on change. The last 5 years, we've ramped up a lot, but we really need to focus on the importance of customer and the importance of employee, because while it's always been human, we don't do a good job, and therefore we don't have retentions, we don't set proper expectations out for our employees, so how are they going to set proper expectations for the customers? So it's really about learning and relearning, and as leaders, we have to keep educating ourselves on what our employees need and what our customers need and expect.
Yeah, you've both picked up on 2 really interesting points there. One, the turnover, the legacy of turnover of sales staff, which helps means it's very difficult to have that consistency of service. Absolutely. But also the change in expectations of both the employees and the customer, which has changed what a salesperson should be. Absolutely. Or any person working within the dealership.
Service advisor as well.
Absolutely. So how do we keep on top of that? How do we, what are some of the things that you've seen and perhaps experienced within Pendragon that have helped you to retain more people and have attracted a different type of person that is able to deal with a different type of customer?
Sure. So from my experience, we had a great chief people officer named Lizzie Downs who came in and really focused strongly on on employee retention. And our rates, and I can't quote it because I don't remember it, I don't want to misquote, but our rates went up significantly from the time that Lizzie got there to the time that we sold the company to Lithia in the US. And that was a big thing for us. And it was listening to our employees, right? Sending out the surveys, but then listening and acting off the back of them, responding to everything that was said, really understanding and being better, and I go back to it, being better leaders. How dare I expect one of my employees to act a certain way if I'm not acting that way? If I've not given them the tools and I've not shown them and talked with them on how to be a good marketing expert, how to be a good salesperson, how do I expect them to do that? That's ridiculous. And I think over the years, we really have not been great about upskilling people, having those conversations, and upskilling ourselves as leaders. We kind of get complacent sometimes. So I think there's a huge opportunity, and some are really great at doing it, others aren't. So I think there's a huge opportunity, and the onus goes on the leaders to really better ourselves, because then I can have the conversations with the people that work for me and the people that work with me on how they can better themselves. And once they believe that I want them to be better, they're going to stay around longer. When you invest in your employees, they will show you a return on your investment every time.
Yeah. Neil?
I think just back to expectations, if you think about all the stuff that's going on around EVs at the moment, who really in your business feels absolutely equipped to deal with the questions that customers have? Because quite often when we're polling people, there's so much confusion, so much lack of understanding of EVs that it's a real opportunity for us to upskill our colleagues and make sure that they're the experts that help people through this transition as well. So again, there is a challenge, but it is an opportunity at the same time.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any more questions from the floor? There's one at the front.
By the way, guys, thank you so much for asking these questions. They're great questions so far.
See, with a number of quality complaints often land with the lender or the broker, which can impact the customer experience. So what would you say things need to be done to improve on that so it doesn't make the customer experience worse?
So for me, I think it's all communication and clarity, right? It's helping the customer understand, much like they don't realize when they're buying from a dealership that they're not buying from the manufacturer themselves, right? When there's a broker involved, when there's a lender involved, understanding that relationship and really helping the customer understand that you're there to make the best experience possible for them. You have a constraint, but I'm going to be as transparent as possible.
Sure.
Okay, so I sold cars for years. I did finance for years. I understand, that's why I say as transparent as possible. There is an amount of transparency that you do need to disclose and make sure the customer understands where your responsibilities start and where they end and what you are responsible for. So it's not going to stop a terrible experience, but it's not always, if they have a terrible experience with a broker or lender, but it's not always about making an experience perfect. It's about how you help the customer. More often than not, turning an experience around or just being there to say, I don't know, but I'm going to help you. Let me put you in touch with the right person. I understand this is frustrating. That will go so much further and you will actually get a better review. And most customers, when they look to do things, go to the worst review possible, right? They want to see like who's complaining. If you can turn a review around from bad to good, that's a tremendous, tremendous asset to your organization. So I think it's communication, it's transparency as you can be, and then it's being there to assist the customer and ask the question and saying, you know, if you have a problem or anything like this, why this might not be, I'm not responsible for this, I'm always here to help. And I think that goes a long way.
I think that finance is going to be, for the rest of this year, probably well into next year, a real hot potato. Yeah. Because of whatever happens with the Supreme Court and appeals and all that, the genie's out of the bottle now. And so I think we're going to see a bit of a rise in complaints around finance. And we track that for our clients. And we also have an FCA module within our resolution platform that helps people to track where it's gone wrong and resolve them as quickly as they can, because no one wants to get fined, right? And so I think it's going to be, it's definitely one that we're going to have to keep a real close eye on over the next few months, because starting with Martin Lewis last year and then with the recent court judgment, it's just opened Pandora's box, I think, in terms of the way we sell cars.
It's a bit crazy.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more question if somebody would like to ask it. There you go, just behind you, Kate.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. We talked a lot about service, sales, finance. Many dealerships have real troubles around fragmentation of systems.
Yep.
To empower their employees to actually deliver good customer service. Is that a big issue? What can dealers do around
It's a huge issue. It's the biggest issue out there. You have legacy, sorry, I'm going to get real passionate on this one. You have legacy systems that are just built, stacked upon one another, that are API'd in to a layer. You can't see a customer. You can't tie the data together. You can't, if a customer is shopping in, you own a dealership group, right? Customer is shopping in 2 different Audi stores that are owned by the same dealership group. You can't even see what your own customers are doing in your own organization because it is such a fragmented experience. And instead of actually building from the ground up, it's just been layer upon layer upon layer of stuff with a questionable UX put on it. So here comes my shameless plug, but I'm going to do it anyways. So you look at a system like Pinewood AI, right? You have a full end-to-end experience. We build everything in-house. It's a full cloud-based, first one in Europe. And you can actually follow your customer all the way through the entire cycle, from purchasing all the way to resale and service. That's huge. That allows you to have a customer lifetime value. That is something that is so basic in any other industry, and you just don't get it in the automotive industry because of so many fragmented solutions that are out there. And what that does is it really constrains your revenue. It constrains your growth. You're only as good as the technology and the systems you have. So I think when it comes to all the offerings in the automotive space and all the things that we can do, there's very few solutions that tie everything together where you have a seamless experience. You're not jumping in between screens. You're not, you're able to stay in one place. There's very few where you can tie the customer together. There's very few where you can see what's happening. And without those things, you can't layer on technology because it doesn't work, because it doesn't talk to each other. So you just have another layer of stuff. Right? It's the nicest way I can put it. Does that answer the question?
I think The other side to that is a historic reluctance from some of the large DMS providers to allow integration with other software. So most of us minnows in the market use APIs to be able to push data both ways. And I think historically there's been a bit of a guilty trick by the larger DMSs to try and get people to use them to do everything, when actually specialists might be able to do some of those things on that journey better than they can. So that integration becomes really important, I think, as we move forward.
But I would say on that, when you have but when you have a lot of these legacy systems, because the way they're built, they have to almost build a data layer, and then you've got to plug the API into that. And when you have all the stuff being layered up, and then you're plugging all these APIs in, it's going to break. And you watched it happen in the States. It becomes unstable. It allows less than savory characters to get in and take down systems. It's a massive problem. So you cannot have a legacy system with just APIs plugged in and expect it to run smoothly, expect you to see the data flow, expect it to be safe, because it's not. You have too much coming in and out. So yes, there's reluctance with APIs, but to a point, there's also, you can't just keep building upon something that was coded in the 80s and expect it to work in today's environment. Nothing else does.
Sure.
So why would these systems?
Sure.
Neil's like,
Okay, well, our 45 minutes is up. It's much a surprise to me as it is to everyone else that we're going to finish on time. Thank you for your questions. Please join me in thanking our two excellent experts, Neil Addley and Kim Costello, who I'm sure will be around if you want to have any further conversation with them. Obviously, go and visit their stands. Enjoy the rest of Automotive Management Live.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Cheers.